You've stood in front of the mirror wondering why your hair looks tired even on your best days. If you've ever felt like your haircut is quietly aging you instead of lifting you up, this is for you. I research worst style and beauty mistakes and youth-boosting fixes for mature women, so you get simple, proven transformations that work instantly. Today we're perfecting 7 rejuvenating haircuts to look 10 years younger, rich and elegant at 50 plus. And by part 7, you'll want to pause and look in the mirror. I mean it. We're also covering 3 haircut mistakes quietly stealing your youthful glow. So stay through to the end. The very first cut on this list? Stylists rarely recommend it to women over 50, and that is exactly the mistake we are fixing right now. Let's go. 1. The long layered shag with curtain bangs. You have probably been told that long hair is off limits once you pass 50. That advice is outdated, and honestly it might be the reason your hair has felt stuck in the same shape for years. The truth is that long hair only ages you when it has no movement, and that is exactly what a layered shag fixes. Here is the part nobody explains. A single length cut sits heavy on mature hair, dragging your whole face downward. The long layered shag does the opposite. It removes weight from the mid-lengths and ends so your hair moves the second you turn your head. The first thing that transforms this cut is the curtain bangs framing your face. They soften your forehead, open up your eyes, and draw attention exactly where you want it. Second, the internal layering throughout the crown creates lift at the root, which fights flatness before it starts. Third, textured, razor-cut ends replace blunt edges, giving the whole style a soft, undone movement instead of a stiff shape. Fourth, the length itself sits just past the collarbone, which elongates your neck rather than shortening it. And fifth, this cut is styled with a loose, tousled finish rather than pin-straight perfection, which instantly reads as younger and more relaxed. Your natural elegance deserves a cut that actually works with your face, not against it. If you are still flat ironing this cut into submission every morning, swap it out. A diffuser on low heat brings out the natural texture the shag depends on. And if you're still asking for one blunt length at your appointments, swap that request for internal layering. The difference shows the moment you walk out of the salon. This one is everything. That soft, lived-in movement you see on women whose hair always looks effortless? It comes from this exact layering technique, not from expensive products. Maintenance is simple. A light dusting of the ends every 8 to 10 weeks keeps the shape alive without losing length. And a texturizing spray on damp hair before you dry it locks in that soft, tousled finish all day. There is one more thing about this cut that most women don't expect. It photographs beautifully from every angle, because the layers catch light differently depending on how you move. That means no more dreading photos at family gatherings. Honestly, this is the cut I recommend first to almost every client who tells me she feels invisible, because it gives your whole face somewhere to land. Part 2 is where things get even more interesting because this next cut solves a problem almost nobody talks about, the one making your jawline look heavier than it actually is. 2. The soft blunt lob with jaw-lifting layers. Have you ever wondered why a chin-length cut can look elegant on one woman and aging on another? It usually has nothing to do with her hair. It has everything to do with where the cut ends relative to her jawline. The mistake most stylists make is cutting a bob exactly at the jaw, which draws a hard horizontal line right where you least want emphasis. The soft blunt lob fixes this by landing just below the jaw, at the collarbone, which lifts rather than boxes in your face. This is the facelift cut stylists rarely explain in plain language. The key insight is subtle internal layering hidden beneath a blunt outer line. From the outside it looks sleek and polished, but underneath, hidden layers do all the lifting work. 5 things make this lob transformative. First, the blunt outer perimeter creates the illusion of thickness, which matters enormously for mature hair. Second, invisible layers underneath prevent the heaviness a true blunt cut usually causes. Third, the length is customized to sit just above your collarbone, the exact point that elongates your neck. Fourth, a slight forward angle toward the face adds emphasis to your cheekbones and jawline. Fifth, subtle face framing pieces are left slightly longer at the front to soften the transition from hair to face. Yes, that's simple. If you are still asking your stylist for a straight across bob at the jaw, swap that request for an angled lob that lands lower. And if you're still using a boar bristle brush that flattens your roots, swap it for a vented brush that lifts as you dry. Your bone structure was built for this cut. Most women just never got the chance to see it framed correctly. There is one detail your colorist should know before your next appointment. A subtle money piece highlight near the face, placed exactly where the layers begin, makes the lifting effect twice as visible on camera and in person. Maintenance for this cut is refreshingly low effort. A trim every 6 to 8 weeks keeps the blunt line crisp, and a lightweight smoothing serum on the ends prevents the flyaways that come with finer, more mature hair textures. A friend of mine switched to this exact cut last year, and 3 separate strangers complimented her within the same week. That is not a coincidence. That is what happens when a haircut finally works with your bone structure instead of against it. Part 3 brings us to the cut most women fear the most, and the one that, done correctly, might surprise you completely. 3. The feathered pixie crop. This one might make you a little nervous, and that is completely fair. The pixie crop has a reputation, and not always a kind one, but almost none of that reputation is deserved once you understand what a feathered pixie actually does. Here is the truth nobody tells you. A short, blunt pixie can look severe on a mature face because it removes all softness at once. A feathered pixie solves that by keeping soft, wispy pieces throughout, especially around your face and at the nape. The key insight is this: the feathering technique, not the length, is what determines whether a pixie ages you or transforms you. 2 women with the same length can look completely different depending on how the ends are cut. 5 elements make this version work beautifully on mature faces. First, feathered point-cut ends replace hard, blunt edges throughout the whole style. Second, slightly longer pieces are left at the crown to build soft height without stiffness. Third, the sides are kept close but not shaved flat, preserving a feminine silhouette. Fourth, wispy face framing pieces soften the transition around your temples and cheeks. Fifth, subtle asymmetry between the 2 sides keeps the whole look from feeling rigid or masculine. This one is everything. If you're still asking for a uniform, symmetrical pixie, swap that for gentle asymmetry. It reads as intentional and elegant rather than severe. And if you're using heavy pomade to hold this style, swap it for a lightweight texture paste that keeps movement instead of stiffness. There is one thing about this cut that changes how your entire face reads on camera, and it takes your stylist about 4 extra minutes of feathering at the crown to achieve. Your natural elegance shows up instantly with this cut, because there is nowhere left for your features to hide. Maintenance is minimal but consistent. Trims every 4 to 5 weeks keep the feathering crisp, since pixies grow out faster visually than longer cuts, and a small amount of texture cream worked into damp hair before drying keeps the wispy movement intact all day. I have watched women walk out of the salon after this cut and stand taller within minutes. That is not vanity. That is what happens when your hair finally stops hiding your face. Part 4 is for anyone whose hair has thinned near the crown, because this next cut was practically designed to solve that exact problem. 4. The rounded volume bob. If your crown has started to feel a little thinner than it used to, you are far from alone. Almost every woman I work with over 50 mentions it eventually, usually in a lowered voice like it's something to be embarrassed about. It isn't. The mistake most women make is choosing a flat, sleek bob when their hair has thinned, which only emphasizes how little volume remains at the root. The rounded volume bob does the opposite by building deliberate shape and lift exactly where you need it most. Here's the insight that changes everything. Volume in a bob doesn't come from length or thickness of the strands themselves. It comes from graduated layering at the crown that creates the illusion of density, regardless of how fine your hair has become. 5 things define this cut. First, graduated layers are stacked slightly at the back to build a rounded silhouette, rather than a flat one. Second, the length sits at the jaw to chin area, which is precisely calibrated for maximum roundness without looking dated. Third, root lifting layers are concentrated specifically at the crown, the area most affected by thinning. Fourth, the ends are kept soft rather than razor sharp, which adds to the visual fullness. Fifth, a slight outward flip at the ends completes the rounded shape without looking like a rigid, old-fashioned bob. You needed to hear this. If you're still parting your hair in the same place you have for 20 years, swap it for a slightly deeper side part. It instantly adds visible root volume. And if you're using a flat iron on this cut, swap it for a round brush blowout, which is what actually builds the shape. There is a reason this exact bob shows up in almost every before and after transformation for thinning crowns. It works with your existing density instead of pretending you have more hair than you do. Your bone structure carries this cut beautifully, especially through the cheek and jaw area where the roundness sits. Maintenance means a root lifting spray applied at the crown before blow drying upside down for the first few minutes, plus a trim every 6 weeks to maintain the rounded shape before it starts growing out flat. One of my clients told me this cut was the first time in years she didn't feel the need to touch her crown self-consciously in photos. That kind of freedom is exactly what the right shape gives you. Part 5 is for anyone who has been afraid that shoulder-length hair simply doesn't work anymore. It absolutely does when it's cut this specific way. 5. Textured shoulder-length layers with face-framing pieces. Shoulder-length hair gets an unfair reputation for being the safe choice, the one you default to when you don't know what else to try. But safe and shapeless are not the same thing, and this cut proves it. The mistake is treating shoulder length as a single generic style rather than a customizable canvas. Left without proper layering, shoulder-length hair tends to sit heavy and shapeless, which is exactly what makes it feel like a non-decision rather than an elegant one. The key insight here is that shoulder-length hair actually requires more layering technique than shorter cuts, not less, because there is more length for gravity to pull flat. 5 elements bring this cut to life. First, long face framing layers begin at the cheekbone and gradually lengthen toward the shoulder, creating a soft frame around your entire face. Second, internal layering throughout the mid-lengths removes bulk without sacrificing overall length. Third, the ends are cut with a slight texturizing technique that prevents the heavy, blunt look shoulder-length hair often falls into. Fourth, subtle layers around the crown add lift so the style doesn't sit flat against your head. Fifth, the overall shape is slightly longer in the front than the back, which elongates your neckline. There is one technique that changes how your entire face reads in every photo you take. And it takes your stylist exactly 4 extra minutes of face framing layering to create. If you're still wearing this length completely one length, swap it for graduated face framing pieces immediately. It is the single fastest way to modernize this cut. And if you rely on a curling wand for all your styling, swap in a few sections of flat iron waves near the face for a softer, more polished finish. Those beautiful eyes deserve a frame that draws people toward them instead of past them. This one is everything. Maintenance involves a trim every 8 to 10 weeks to preserve the face framing shape, and a lightweight oil applied only to the ends to prevent the dryness that mid-length mature hair is especially prone to. A woman in one of my earlier videos told me this exact cut was the first haircut in a decade that made her feel like herself again instead of just presentable. That is the goal every single time. Part 6 takes us into gray and silver territory, because this next cut was designed specifically to make transitioning hair look intentional rather than accidental. 6. The silver shag with root lift. If your hair has started turning silver or gray, you have probably noticed something frustrating. The exact same cut that looked elegant with color often looks flat and lifeless once the gray takes over. That is not your hair failing you. That is a cutting mismatch nobody warned you about. Gray and silver hair is structurally different from pigmented hair. It's often coarser and holds shape differently, which means a cut designed for colored hair frequently falls flat, quite literally, once your natural silver comes through. The insight that changes everything is this. Silver hair needs deliberate texture and root lift built into the cut itself, because the added density and coarseness of gray strands can otherwise weigh the whole style down. 5 details make the silver shag work specifically for gray and silver hair. First, heavier layering throughout the crown accounts for the extra density silver hair often carries. Second, root lift is built directly into the cutting angle, not left to styling alone. Third, textured. Piece-wide ends embrace rather than fight the natural coarser texture of gray hair. Fourth, the length stays versatile, somewhere between chin and shoulder, so it photographs well loose or pulled back. Fifth, subtle warmth is often added through toning rather than full color, which keeps your silver luminous instead of dull. Honestly, gray hair is not something to tone into oblivion. A slight warmth to the tone can make your whole complexion glow. If your stylist keeps toning your silver into flat, ashy gray, swap that request for the tiniest hint of warmth. Champagne or pearl undertones work beautifully. And if you're using a purple shampoo daily, swap to using it just once a week, since overuse can leave silver hair looking dull and lifeless. This is the one that made a friend of mine stop mid-conversation, reach for a mirror and ask what changed. It was this exact cut. Your natural elegance and your silver hair were never opposites. This cut proves it. Maintenance includes a chelating shampoo once a month to prevent yellowing from hard water or product buildup, and a weekly deep conditioning mask, since gray hair tends to run drier than pigmented hair. This one is everything for women who have been quietly dreading their gray coming in fully. It doesn't have to be dreaded. It has to be cut correctly. Part 7 is our final haircut, and it might be the single most requested cut in salons this year for exactly this age group. 7. The side-swept layered bob with undercut volume. We've saved this one for last because it quietly does more work than almost any other cut on this list, and most women have never even heard of it by name. The mistake is thinking a side-swept style is only about the front section of hair. In reality, the transformation happens underneath, in a subtle undercut layer most people never see but everyone notices the effect of. Here's the insight your stylist may never have explained. A light undercut layer beneath the top section removes bulk at the nape while adding invisible lift throughout the crown, which is exactly why this bob holds volume all day without teasing or heavy products. 5 elements complete this cut. First, a deep side part immediately creates asymmetry, which reads as more modern and less severe than a center part. Second, the undercut layer beneath the crown removes weight without shortening the visible length. Third, the front section sweeps diagonally across the forehead, softening lines without covering your eyes. Fourth, graduated layers around the jaw continue the lifting effect from part 2, but with an added asymmetrical edge. Fifth, subtle point cutting at the ends keeps the whole silhouette from looking too structured or stiff. Yes, that's simple. If you're still center parting hair that has thin near your temples, swap to a deep side part immediately. It visually restores fullness at the root. And if your stylist has never mentioned undercutting, ask specifically for it at your next appointment. It changes everything about how this bob holds shape. There is one detail that changes how this entire cut performs day to day. And it happens beneath the surface where nobody but your stylist ever sees it. Your bone structure has been waiting for a cut with this much intentional asymmetry. Maintenance requires trims every 7 to 9 weeks to keep the undercut from growing too visible, and a light hold texturizing spray to maintain the deep side part without it collapsing by midday. This is the cut that made me stop mid-sentence with a client last year, because the transformation was that immediate. She looked 10 years lighter within the first blow dry. Now that you have all 7 cuts, it's time for the 3 mistakes quietly working against every single one of them, starting with a mistake almost every woman over 50 is making right now without realizing it. 8. Mistake 1. The flat, all one-length cut. Have you ever left the salon feeling like your hair looked exactly the same as it did 5 years ago, just shorter? That is not your imagination. That is the single most common mistake I see on mature women, and it has nothing to do with length. The mistake is choosing one uniform length with no layering whatsoever, often out of a belief that it looks neat or safe. In reality, an all-one-length cut is the fastest way to make thick or thinning hair alike look heavy, flat, and dated. Here's why it happens so often. Many salons default to one-length cuts because they're faster and require less skill, not because they actually flatter mature faces. You've been getting the easy cut, not the right one. The 5 fixes matter here just as much as they did with the haircuts themselves. First, ask specifically for layering, even subtle layering, rather than accepting a uniform length by default. Second, request face framing pieces regardless of which base style you choose from this list. Third, avoid cutting everything to the exact same length even at the back, since a slightly graduated nape prevents heaviness. Fourth, ask your stylist to point cut the ends rather than blunt cutting them straight across. Fifth, request a consultation specifically about your face shape before agreeing to any length. This one is everything. If you're still requesting just a trim, same as always, swap that request for a trim with some added layering. It costs nothing extra and changes the entire result. And if your stylist resists adding layers, swap stylists. Your hair deserves someone paying attention to more than the length. You needed to hear this. The good news is that fixing this mistake doesn't require starting over. Most stylists can add layering to your existing length in a single appointment. No dramatic chop required. Maintenance from here forward means asking for layer maintenance at every trim, not just the length trim, so the shape you fought for doesn't quietly disappear over a few months. I have watched this single adjustment transform more women than any product or color change ever has. It costs you nothing but a slightly different request at your next appointment. Mistake 2 is even sneakier. Because it happens in your own bathroom every single morning, not at the salon. 9. Mistake 2. Over-teasing and heavy backcombing. Here's a question worth sitting with for a moment. When was the last time you touched your roots without immediately reaching for a comb or your fingers to fix them? The mistake is relying on heavy backcombing or teasing to fake volume your cut alone isn't providing. It works for about an hour, and then it collapses, often leaving your hair looking more tangled and damaged than before you started. The key insight is uncomfortable but important. Teasing doesn't create volume. It creates the illusion of volume by tangling the hair shaft, which weakens fine, mature hair over time and leads to more breakage exactly where you can least afford it. 5 fixes replace this habit entirely. First, root lifting spray applied at the base before blow drying does the volume work teasing was trying to fake. Second, blow drying upside down for the first 2 minutes builds genuine lift at the root. Third, a round brush used while drying creates shape without any backward combing motion at all. Fourth, dry shampoo at the roots adds texture and grip that teasing was substituting for. Fifth, the correct haircut, one of the 7 from earlier in this video, does most of this work automatically without any styling effort at all. That contrast is what makes this so frustrating. You've been working harder for a result your haircut should be giving you for free. If you're still teasing your crown every morning, swap it entirely for root lifting spray and an upside-down blow dry. The volume lasts longer and your hair thanks you for it. And if you're using a fine tooth comb to backcomb, get rid of it completely. It has no place in a healthy mature hair routine anymore. This one is everything, and it's the fix most women thank me for months later, once they notice their hair is actually growing healthier. Maintenance from here means retiring teasing completely and relying instead on cut, root lift product, and proper blow drying technique for volume that lasts the entire day without damage. Your hair has been asking for a gentler approach for years. This is the moment you finally give it one. Mistake 3 might be the most overlooked of all because it happens in a place most women never think to check. Part 10. Mistake 3. Ignoring harsh root regrowth contrast. The back of your head. When was the last time you actually checked it in a mirror, rather than assuming it looks the same as the front? The mistake is letting root regrowth create a harsh, visible line of demarcation, especially at the crown and part line, where the contrast between natural gray or regrowth and your color is most noticeable to everyone but you. Here's the insight that surprises most women. This mistake isn't really about color maintenance timing. It's about the sharp, straight line contrast itself, which reads as neglect even when your overall color looks fine everywhere else. 5 fixes solve this permanently. First, ask your colorist about a root blending technique called a shadow root, which softens the transition instead of creating a hard line. Second, book touch-ups based on visible contrast, not a fixed calendar date since regrowth speed varies. Third, a root concealing powder in your exact shade fills gaps between appointments in under a minute. Fourth, moving your part slightly, even half an inch, disrupts the straight demarcation line entirely. Fifth, discuss low-maintenance color options like balayage or baby lights with your colorist, since they grow out with a soft gradient instead of a harsh line. There is one technique that changes how your entire root line reads in every single photo, and your colorist can apply it in the same appointment as your regular color, at no extra time. If you're still waiting for the calendar to tell you it's time for a touch-up, swap that for waiting on the mirror instead. Contrast is the real signal. And if you've never asked about a shadow root, swap your next appointment request to include it specifically. You needed to hear this, especially if it's been longer than you'd like to admit since your last appointment. Maintenance here means keeping a small root concealer in your bag for the 2 or 3 weeks before each color appointment, and repositioning your part occasionally so regrowth never has the chance to form one continuous line. Between these 7 cuts and these 3 fixes, you now have everything most women spend years figuring out through trial and error alone. You just learned 7 haircuts built specifically for mature faces, plus 3 mistakes most women make without ever realizing it. That is knowledge most women spend years piecing together alone, through trial, error, and disappointing salon visits. Boom, your bone structure was always this stunning. Now it finally shows. Tell me which of these 7 cuts matched your face shape, and which of the 3 mistakes were you making without knowing it? Drop it in the comments, I read every single one. Next time we're tackling the one accessory mistake that quietly adds 10 years overnight, and you will not want to miss it. Like this video, subscribe to Timeless Wisdom Path, And I'll see you in the next one.